Labadiena. My name is V.Jakovels and this is my colleague V.Jakovels. And we were going to tell you about our collaboration in Agile projects. But since we talked to our colleagues here in Lithuania, we're from Latvia, by the way. Since we talked to our colleagues here in Lithuania, it's obvious that we share the same problems. And so we shifted the focus of our presentation a little bit to more represent how we are working with public sector in Agile way. So we will tell about specific story that we're having right now, but the focus will be more on public sector and how to work with fixed price projects, because I think that was also a question asked before in Agile. So just a little bit of background. I come from a company called eBIT. It's a fairly new company. It was started up just this year. So we've grown to 30 people right now, and we do IT consultancy and development. Tieto is, I think, a bit more known.
Yeah,
so.
And I'm a project manager from Tieto. I'm a project manager of that project we will tell you about today. And it's a quite complex project in Latvian public sector.
Yep. So feel free to visit our websites if you want to know a bit more of information. So a little bit more just to give you the background. So I've been working with Agile for I don't know, about 5 years right now. And my main goal was to implement Agile methodologies, and my kind of toolkit of choice is Scrum for development project and Scrum Bun for maintenance, because we have mixed maintenance and change requests. So I like to keep those teams together. So I will be more probably telling about my experience with all of the projects, and Vitalis will be more on top about what's happening here in this specific one. So one more thing just to clarify, most of the time when we're saying Agile, we'll be thinking Scrum, because this project goes in Scrum.
Yep. So the project is for Ministry of Education and Science, Republic of Latvia, and the project scope is development of state education information system. And here you also can see one print screen from the main page of that system. As we already told you, there are 2 companies, there are 2 partners, and there are 2 teams, and those teams are located in different places. So at the beginning we decided how to manage this project and what will be the structure of our cooperation. And we decided to make it in 3 stages. And as you can see, the first stage is where our companies are working together. And working together, it means that we are working together physically in one office, in one rooms. And for example, at the beginning, our teams were working together in this planning poker when we were evaluating all things which were in our tender, and also in that phase we were giving this experience and giving this knowledge between both teams and between each member of our teams. In this stage, when we are working together, we also make a sprint planning, and after sprint planning we usually go to the second stage, and the second stage is where we are working separately. And working separately means that developers from Tieto work in Tieto and eBIT work in eBIT. Yeah? And in this stage we make coding process, and we also make development. After this we work again together, but we are working also together with a client. And this stage is demonstrations and retro. So client also takes part in our demonstrations. And after demonstration stage, we are going back to sprint planning, then development, again demonstration, and in such way till the end of the project.
So one question that if some of you I know have done Scrum, and one question may arise why we're working separately in this stage when the theory says that you need to have daily stand-ups together and so on. So actually we found that since our teams are not co-located, and each team is about the Scrum team size, we found that it's not much of use if we have daily telcos together or something like that. So we meet in meetings that we need to meet. Sprints are 2 weeks long, so this interaction is fairly online even without the daily stand-ups together. So we found that, not correctly to say price performance, but so to say that the hassle is not worth it. Okay, so now that you've got the background on the project on how we are actually working, we're going to switch to what I was saying, how to work in Agile way with public sector. Those of you who don't know it should read it. Those of you who already know it, it's from Agile Manifesto. So basic stuff. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and so on and so on. I won't read it, you can do it yourselves. So what is important and what Agile stresses is what's right here in bold. But as Mary, I think, mentioned earlier, you need to understand where the client is coming from. And you need to understand that there are things that client needs. And I hear a lot that there's a huge problem working with public sector in Agile way. And one very, very dear client of mine, I never heard him once use a word problem. He always says challenge. So for me, it's more of a challenge. How do you get these things working? Because of course, customer collaboration is very, very important. You build customer relations and so on, but you still have contracts in place. And it's not always that you can write the contract in a way that, that was described earlier. So if the situation here in Lithuania is the same as in Latvia, you mostly get those, get the requirements. And you have to say, yes, we will do everything that is there. And you cannot redefine them in contract negotiations. And clients still need a contract because they need, it's legally binding and so on. They won't say that, okay, you look respectable, we will trust you, we don't need a contract. Go do some coding. Another thing, individuals and interactions, of course, we're all people. We are people, clients also is a person. But then there are some processes in place which cannot be altered for one reason or another. You can challenge them and you have to challenge them, but some processes you just cannot alter. And there are some tools that you will have to use because they're there and because you have to do it the specific way. What you need to understand is that you can change all those. So working software, of course, that's the end product of the working software. But especially in public sector, you also have to have some documents because it's EU regulations, because they need to be there. And there's no way around it. So you can say that it's waste, but you still have to produce some documents. And then there's kind of the essence of Agile itself, responding to change. But there's still a plan, and there's still a deadline, there's still a budget, and you have to respect that. It's not always time material. And I think I haven't worked in one time material project during my whole career in IT. I've always done fixed price project, and Agile works really good with that. So you need to understand that these are the limitations that are there. So to say, it's a framework, but the substance is this one. And you have to find the best way to fill this framework with this substance. And for the contract, you need to have the contract. If you cannot change the contract, you need to later negotiate how you represent that, and we will go into more details about that. About the processes and tools, again, challenge those processes. If you can get rid of them, get rid of them. If you cannot, respect that, but do a minimum. I was giving similar talk in Latvia, and then one person tweeted, said, well, before I thought I was lazy, now I know that I'm agile. So do a minimum of this. Also do a minimum of this, because you will have to have some sort of documentation. And do that, but agree with the client what's the minimum amount. Because, yeah, most of the time it is waste. And about the plan, again, plan may change. You cannot change everything, but you can change some stuff.
And now we'll try to tell a little bit more from experience in that point Armand already mentioned. And if we speak about customer collaboration, the first thing you should do is describe the scope in agile-friendly way. And in our case, preferably in user stories. And there is always this question, and how to make client work with user stories. And the answer, especially if it's a client in public sector, and the answer is maybe simple, and the action is not. You should just transfer those requirements into user stories. And the same thing was in our project, because initially there were only requirements. Then we came over all the requirements and transferred them to the user stories and to the acceptance criteria. Then we took those user stories and came to the client and discussed all user stories and all acceptance criteria with our customer. And the main thing here is you should be prepared and you should come with user stories and not just come and say, okay, let's make those user stories together. Because when you come with user stories, client needs just to criticize them. And as you know, this is the main thing for client to criticize. Yeah? So they were feeling really free to criticize us, and I hope our criticisms were on that stage of the project. Doing that, we achieved two goals. We described the scope in user stories, and we also make an agreement for this acceptance criteria. Yeah? We did it for 2 or 3 or 4 times, because we were writing new user stories, then rewriting them, but we came to final agreement. One more thing here is also you should if you want to make client working with user stories, you should make this process interesting for the client. And for example, in our case, we use a software tool for management of user stories. It's called Pivotal Tracker. And we just gave the access for our client, and now he can see our everyday progress. He can see all user stories. He can change the status of user stories. He can change the priority for them. He can manage which user stories will be in the next sprint, and it's more interesting for him. He is together with us, and they're getting used with user stories, you know. So it's very important to have this interesting part too.
Yeah, and actually, as I said earlier, you don't always, and most of the time, not then yes, the contract is not written in user stories, so you have requirements. The earlier you transfer them to user stories, the better for you, because eventually, when you do the testing and when you do the acceptance, it doesn't matter if there's 3-level architecture. It doesn't matter if the system is flexible enough or not, whatever that means. It matters that the system does what it's meant to do. And if you write it in user stories, who does what and for what purpose, then it's easy to understand why you need some sort of functionality in place. So either way, you will have to do that. The earlier you do it, the better. You will just agree with the client about what the system needs to do. And if you cannot do that, then you don't understand what it must do, and you still need to work on that.
Mm-hmm. And the second point here, you should also reach an agreement on customer involvement, because in Agile, customer is involved all the time, and even more than in waterfall project. And you should warn the customer before of that, and you should also tell that in trade-off they will have a better product and better results at the end than in waterfall project, probably, yeah, of course. And the second thing here, you should also get support from management of the client, because especially in public sector, yeah, if you have a support from the management, then it's almost every time it's green light, yeah, for you.
Yeah, so also a case from my previous experience. People have heard about Agile and they know that that's the new cool stuff. So some of them want it, some of them don't want it, but there are people that you go to them and they say, yeah, we want to work in Agile. And you say, well, okay, but that will require that you have, I don't know, 4 of your best people working with us at least half the time for the whole duration of the project. And then they say, oh, well, maybe not. And you need to have that commitment from the management that those people will be there. Because if they say maybe not, that's the best case, because then you can tell them, well, okay, come back to us when you have those people. Most of the time they will say, yeah, sure, no problem. And then when the project is in place, those people are actually busy doing their everyday stuff. And you cannot get access to them. So this commitment that those people will be there is very, very important.
Yeah, and the last one thing I want to mention here is that you should also make cooperation between partners seamless for the customer. And it was a really important point for us. And as I told in initial slides, because we had 2 teams, and in fact, customer don't care how many partners are there. Customer just one good team, and customer expect results. So you must give customer results and not any problems from a cooperation stuff. And that was one of the main points for us, yeah, because we are 2. So to sum up, this topic is the main things: describe scope in an agile-friendly way, reach agreement on customer involvement and project acceptance criteria, and make cooperation between partners seamless for the customer.
Okay, so the second point is individuals and interactions. How many of you are from developer side? Okay, 2 people or something. How many of you are from customer side?
1.
Okay, 1. Okay.
There's competition still.
Bad example. Okay, at least I've heard a lot of customers complain that they do not know what's actually happening in the project. Have you had similar experience? Because there may be a project manager on the customer side that kind of understands what those guys are doing and coding, but everyday user, they don't have a slightest idea what's happening and what needs to be done at the specific moment. And Vaidas said that it doesn't matter if it's Excel sheets or walls or something like that. I hate Excel sheets. I hate them with all my heart, and I hate project files. Because you put something in an Excel sheet, in project file, send it to somebody, and there are tens and there are dozens of versions, and you don't know if you have the latest, if the person you send to it has the latest, if all the people that are involved have this information, and even if you yourself have all the information that you need. So you can do it that way. I don't know, share it somewhere on a network drive or whatever. But what we found that works best for us is just use some kind of a tool that's hosted online and that everybody can access. We use Atlassian Wiki, I think, for those purposes. Yeah. So, but basically, there's also a wall, I think, right?
Yeah, in our project we have this virtual environment, but we also have a wall. It's one of the Scrum rituals, and it's very easy of every project member to come to the wall and to see all information, what is there, this user stories, burn down chart, and the project plan in high level.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of kind of satisfaction when you actually move the physical item and say, yeah, this is done, good for me. So, but still you need to have this common information place, and information needs to be alive. It doesn't matter if you create it at first and you don't maintain it afterwards. You have to, information there needs to be updated daily or hourly if needed. So it doesn't matter if there is such a place but it's not updated. And give that access to the client. There's no secret information. This will build trust in your relationships. Because whether the client uses it or not, that's another question, but give them that possibility. And they will appreciate that in the end. Another important thing is education. You need to educate people, and usually educate by doing together. Don't just give a book to somebody and say, this is Scrum from the trenches, go read it, come back tomorrow, I expect you to be an expert. And this goes both, what you need to understand is that the whole project team, it's not just the kind of development team. The client is also involved. So you need to educate the client. You need to go to the client and sit together and write those user stories. You need to prioritize with them together. You need to give them understanding of what's happening and why you do stuff. The other side of this one is your own team. Never assume that all the people in the team know why they are doing what. Always educate them, because unfortunately, or fortunately for me, unfortunately for the companies I worked for at that time, I've been in many unsuccessful projects. Well, not in many, in a few. But I learned a lot from that. And I've seen that people are doing extremely well with all the rituals. They're meeting for 15 minutes every morning. They're putting the pieces of paper on the wall and so on. But they don't have the slightest idea why they are doing that. So and if it's just the rituals, if there's no substance, then it's just a waste. So you need to educate your own team on why they are doing that. Why is telling what have you done, what you're going to do, and what are the problems important? Why is retrospective important, and so on? Why do you need to show working product, not just something that they made up? Yeah, so that's education. Another kind of part of education is understanding the limitations. Again, if in Agile we try to have as few limitations as possible, but still there are some. And you need to kind of educate people on what are those limitations. That the sprint length is fixed, and it won't jump from 1 week to 7 weeks to 2 days and so on. That all the people, that the team that is there, what's really, really important, what Vaida said, you have to have that team. And you won't have 3 people today, 17 people tomorrow. You will have the team because that's the best way they perform. And there are external limitations like budget, like timeline, deliverables, and so on. Again, understand why is it there. In this specific project, the timeline is the main driver because they have EU funding that they need to spend by the time that some legislation is in place and so on. And the customer is really, really keen on doing stuff and to prioritizing because they need that product. And yeah, and going back to education, really, really, really important point. We were really lucky with this project because we had 2 projects about the same time starting. One was in Scrum and one was usual waterfall, so when we tried Agile. By now, in usual waterfall model, they have a pile of documents and that's it. So nothing really works. They spend the time, they prepared the documentation, specifications, and so on. On the other hand, we already have working prototypes. So if you have that opportunity, if you need to convince your client how to do that, if you have this opportunity, use it. And show them that with the same timeline, with the same effort, with the same budget, you can have results a lot sooner. Yeah, so basic things. So maintain the common information space, educate everybody involved, not just your team, not the client, and understanding of resources.
Mm-hmm. The next thing, working software. And if we speak about working software, the first what you should do is you should implement development methods and not only the Scrum rituals. Of course, it's nice to have those rituals, for example, daily stand-ups, demonstrations, planning poker, but we also should have agile methods. And for example, in our project, we use we have test-driven development. we have continuous integration, we have pair programming, and we also have unit tests based on test-driven development. And it's not obligatory to use all of them. You can use one or two, you can combine them, but you should use at least one, yeah, of these methods. The next thing, very important thing, it's the technical thing, is refactoring of code. And the main principle here is that if you once touch the code, you should make it better. Because usually, if you, in development process, when you are develop system, the code grows, and there's one moment when it's so large that it gets unmanageable, yeah? And in that moment, you need to rewrite almost all code from the scratch. So if you do rewriting and if you do reviewing of the code regularly, you don't have to do that, because you already have code in better condition. And so it should be the main goal for developer to make this code in good condition. Yeah? And if you see the code, so you should leave it in better conditions than it was before. And one more principle here.
Basically, I think I'm not sure if that's an official kind of name, but we call it the scout principle. So kind of scouts that go around. If you go in the woods and you camp there, then you should leave that place in better condition than you've been there before. So if you just open the code, open the package, open an object, you have to leave that in better condition. And at least 2 times I know that it's usually for legacy systems, but still you don't need to end up in that situation. I've opened the code and I've seen a comment. I'm not quite sure what it does, but do not delete this line. If you get to that stage, it's kind of the last time when you need to do the refactoring, because it's already way too late. But if you keep those holy cows of code that nobody can touch because something might go wrong, then your project is dead by that time.
Yeah, and one more thing, you should think about how to simplify your code, because the code should be as simple as it's possible ever, you know. So just be lazy, do simple stuff. Do simple stuff, yeah.
Don't overthink.
And working software is the most important part in Agile for client and for developer, and because of that, you should, at the early beginning, you should define what is your definition of done. What is the working software for you? For example, in our project, working software is software which fits all requirements and user stories, a software which is tested by developer, and a software which is already delivered to the client. Yeah. If at the end of the sprint there's missing some of those parameters, so the software is not working. Yeah. These things can be changeable in different projects. You can work by your conditions, yeah, but there should be a definition of working software.
So basically, this can change from phase to phase, from project to project, and so on. So in one case, it may be if you have extremely good test-driven development, when the code is committed, all the automated tests are run, then that's done, or when you deploy it somewhere. In some cases, you need to have the product running in production for a month, let's say, so you can just test it there, and then you know that it's done. But you need to have that definition, what means done for you at any given time. Because again, one quite interesting story, we were having a telco with our partners, and one of my colleagues asked a question about functionality, is it done yet? And that was the greatest answer I've ever heard to this question. Yes, but not yet. So you need to understand when the software is done, and when you do the demo, just show the stuff that is done, because again, there's 98% working software for weeks and weeks and weeks. So either it's 100% ready or it's not ready at all. And again, it's important to kind of have these small increments of what you understand by ready, and user stories and software small enough to do that.
Yeah. So just to sum up, working software, it's crucial to implement development methods and not only Scrum rituals. You should refactor code developed in previous cycles and simplify it, and you should measure sprint results by working software.
Okay, so responding to change, again, in my opinion, this is the most important stuff about Agile. So just be jumping and doing stuff and so on, and if the situation changes, lying down and stuff like that. So what I get, every time I talk about Agile, I get asked this question. So if the budget is fixed, if the timeline is fixed, if the functionality is described in the contract, where's the responding to change? How can you be Agile? How can you do Scrum? How can you do whatever? Well, this is when those user stories come into play. If you have done your homework, if you have mapped the contract to user stories, if you have agreed about the complexity of the user story, if you have put a price on each complexity point, then when the time comes, and the time will eventually comes when the client comes to you and says, well, it's not really what we want that another thing that's not really in the contract, but can we please have it? And you can say, yes, of course, you can have it, but you will have to take out of the scope this specific functionality that is similar of a value or similar of similar time consuming. That is the one that you want to have in there. And if not, then it's an additional change request, and it will move timeline, and it will expand the budget. Or if it's smaller, and you may come to a point where you actually don't need some of the stuff, you can have that money and use it for change requests. So it's up to the client to decide. But what you need to understand is you need to understand each and every value of each and every user story to do that. Otherwise, when the client comes to you and says, can we have this one small thing? You say, well, okay, I think we're fairly in the budget, fairly in the timeline. Okay, sure. Then he comes another time with this small thing. And again, you say yes, and those things add up. And if those are big things, probably project manager will say, no way. We're over budget, over time, it's not possible. If those are small things, they add up, and you cannot see where your budget is gone. So every time a client comes to you and asks something, you can then negotiate what you replace with something, or if it costs more. Another thing that goes hand in hand with this one is prioritizing. So in several talks I heard today, you have to have these priorities. And I don't even like the word priorities, because when the client comes, of course it's the highest priority. Otherwise, I wouldn't come to you. So I like to say that you have to put things in order. And in this project, it works really well. So the client comes and says, we want that for the next sprint, we want this later, and so on. But you need to have the most important things first. Again, one of the not so successful projects I've been, when I came into the project, the system had everything, all the bells and whistles you can imagine, except the basic functionality that it had to have. So the client asks for, yeah, can we have that? Yeah, sure you can have that. Can we have this one? Sure you can have this one. But the system didn't work. There were really, really cute and cute user interface, really good reports that didn't have any data underneath. So yeah, first things first, and then the rest. And if you don't know what's most important, or if you cannot prioritize, do the hardest stuff first. Because it's our nature to put off the hardest stuff for later, because it's really hard and we don't understand it. But you will just postpone the problems for later. Classic example is interfaces. You have to interface to, interfaces to other systems. You have to interface to other systems, and the systems aren't ready yet, and there are third parties involved, and you don't have the specification. It's a nightmare. So you put it off for later. And then you need to negotiate whether the interface will be like this or like that. Well, you don't get it right the first time, the second time, the 10th time, and so on. If you do the coding before, then you have a ready specification, and you can give it to the third party and say, our interface will be like this. So do that stuff first. what's the third point? Yeah. Another very, not another, but very, very important point is about maintenance. There's a saying that in Scrum you have maintenance after the first sprint. So once you have finished the first sprint, you have potentially shippable product that you that you deploy somewhere, and that's when you start maintaining. Usually it's not the case. It's not the first sprint, it's not the second sprint, but after, I don't know, a month, 2 months, or something like that, you have this product that already adds value to your client. And you deploy it, and of course, since you've been doing test-driven development, and since you are so agile, there are no bugs at all. Except I haven't seen that project. If you have, good for you. We can talk later how you achieved that. There will be bugs, inevitably. And you need to understand that, and you need to factor that in. Because once you deploy the project, the product, you will be working on new features, but also there will be bugs coming in from the production. And in order not to have this fireman situation, you need to plan for that. You need to have a separate budget or at least factor that in. So in this case, it was separate contract, right?
Yeah, we were quite lucky. It was a separate contract for us, but it's really hard way to get this separate contract. So
the main idea is you will have to do that job. And you need to factor that in. Either this is a separate agreement, separate budget, or when you do the estimation, you can say that, okay, 20% of this feature, of complexity of this feature will be for maintenance, and add that on top. But it varies from case to case, so I don't have an easy answer, and I think every time we had some different approach to this one. So basically, it's the main takeaway points: common understanding about items and their value, so the user stories and how much everything costs in the project. Most important stuff first, all the bells and whistles later, and agree on support, or at least know that this will happen.
Yeah.
So conclusions.
Conclusions, and here are all conclusions from our presentation, and you can read them there, but we want to show you the main conclusion of conclusions, yeah, and we can tell you it's really proved in practice. The main conclusion from conclusions is Agile works in public sector, and we will try to prove it's in other projects too.
Okay, so that's it from us.